didn't even bring any food for me and my boyfriend? You selfish woman.
r/Entitled Parents. What is up, guys? Mr. Reddit here, back with another episode of Entitled Parents Stories. r/Entitled Parents is one of my favorite subreddits, and I really enjoyed making this. Now kick back, relax, and enjoy the show. We've got 3 amazing stories that we're reading today from Reddit. Our first story, Entitled Aunt Kicks Out Family, Asks for Money, and Loses House. After that, Entitled Cousin walks in on an inappropriate game, and Entitled Aunt attempts to sue for emotional trauma. And after that, we'll head over to r/Entitled People to read about an entitled aunt who tries to gate crash and then destroy my wedding. Before we begin, welcome to our newest subscribers, Mateo, Proto, and Bugaman. If you're new around here, subscribe to the channel for new Reddit stories every single day. Entitled Aunt Kicks Out Family, Asks for Money, and Loses House. This happened many years ago, and decided to post now as some news came up, and I just had to share. I'll start off with the backstory to set the scene. Sorry for any errors and run-ons. On mobile, and even though English is my first and only language, I'm still bad at it. My entitled aunt owned a nice house with her then husband. It was built sometime in the 60s with many rooms. They had many kids, and by many, I mean a lot. So many, they ended up building additional rooms. My entitled aunt was somewhat of an entrepreneur and ventured in many small business dealings, all of which never lasted. Her last one, as far as I can remember, was in the tax industry, but that ended badly as she was charged with some sort of fraud. I was young, so details are a bit fuzzy. Since then, even at a young age, I knew the family was falling apart. I lived a short walk away and liked to visit my cousin's house every now and then so we could stroll down the street to some creek at one end of the road or some gas station on the other end where they had a sitting area to snack and chat. Some days, as I walked by, I could hear yelling coming from the house, all of the yelling coming from entitled aunt. The neighborhood was quite safe and rural enough that kids could play in the street without a care in the world. But as I remember those yells and passing the house knowing I couldn't play with my cousins for a while, it saddens me knowing I could have done something. Again, I was a kid, and a sheltered one at that. I would also like to point out entitled aunt was not only verbally abusive, but heavily physically abusive as well. But this is a rant for another time. While entitled aunt's marriage was on the line, she decided to open a new business outside of the city, but only take a few of her kids with her and leave the rest to fend for themselves. The dad? I don't know. Maybe he left with entitled aunt, or he had left entitled aunt at the time. I hardly saw him. As far as the kids she took, it was obvious who the favorites were. Because while entitled aunt promoted one of the kids she took, because she saw greatness in some ability, I'll be vague with that talent to save face, but one of her kids left behind developed a serious medical illness. Entitled aunt never came, and her excuse was she was busy, or that sick kid, 12 years old, was faking it by having seizures. I was there when many of them occurred, and it was sad when she cried for her mommy when it happened. Younger me felt helpless in a house full of unsupervised minors. My parents were clueless as to what was happening then, but who knows? This is where it gets interesting and the bricks start to fall. The illness of this kid led to hospitalization. When the hospital asked for a parent, the eldest of one of the left-behind kids stated they were away and staying home alone. This triggered CPS involvement, of course, and all the left-behind kids that stayed in that house were taken away, except for the eldest, who was over 18 years. Entitled aunt never came back into town, and her excuse was she was busy. When she was asked to come to a hearing to try to get her kids back, it was another excuse about her husband. Excuse followed excuse, and the kids ended up staying in CPS custody till they were either of age or they found foster homes. Back to the house. The eldest eventually moved out to start his own life, and the property tax kept adding up with no one paying. My parents didn't want the house to go to waste, as it had a good foundation, location, and space. The downside was it needed a lot of renovations and was at risk of foreclosure. Eventually, they contacted the husband, who said it was okay to stay there if they managed the financing, and he would take care of the renovations. Both my parents wanted to buy the house, and talks were progressing to get it. During the time staying there, the tax amount was getting lower and renovation was starting. Everything was good. An entitled aunt seemed to be out of the picture, seeing as how she severed communication with everyone, including her husband after repeated attempts. Many years passed, and the house was becoming somewhat of a halfway house for out-of-town family and friends coming to our town looking for a fresh start. Many stayed a few months till they could find a decent job and save to move out, but they all helped with bills. No hard feelings, and we all got along. We had gotten word that Entitled Aunt's business was raided, and she was on the run. The grapevine mentions things of drugs, stolen vehicles and items, and more with her boyfriend. Keep in mind, the divorce with her husband was not final because she refused to sign the paperwork. There are a lot of stories I could share about Entitled Aunt, most of which I experienced firsthand, but this is a summary of it. Then it happened. She was back in town, and what better place to crash than your own home, right? Technically, it was still her home since the divorce wasn't final. So, what is the first thing Entitled Aunt says when she shows up unannounced?
Get the heck out of my house!
At that time, the people staying in the house were me, my parents, my brother, and his very pregnant wife who was due any day. There was a lot of back and forth between Entitled Aunt and my dad, Entitled Aunt's brother, saying that Entitled Aunt's husband said it was okay, but she refused to understand and said the house was still under her name. Entitled Aunt's husband couldn't be reached at the time, as he was out of the country for some business matter, and by the time it got dark, the argument seemed to die down a bit, but the tension was thick as butter. We were hungry and tired by that time, so my mom went to get some fast food. While she was gone, Entitled Aunt decided to make herself at home and cook up some noodles for her boyfriend. Between these moments, my dad stated that he was making payments and everyone was chipping in to get the taxes back in good standing. To which Entitled Aunt responds with something like,
Well, this is my house and I don't have to pay anything.
Yeah, that's not how property taxes work. When my mom came back with the food, we, being everyone besides Entitled Aunt and her boyfriend, started to eat.
You didn't even bring any food for me and my boyfriend? You selfish woman,
Entitled Aunt says, and the argument starts up once again. The horrible thing about the whole situation was we couldn't even kick her out. The house was still under Entitled Aunt's name at the time, and we had no way nor paperwork of proving Entitled Aunt's husband agreed it was okay to stay there. The agreement was more of a verbal contract, and boy, did my dad regret it. Towards the end, we decided to pack a few things and stay with a nearby relative, at least until we were able to get in contact with Entitled Aunt's husband. The problem was we needed a few boxes, so we all drove together to some local shop for packing material. When we got out, we found a lot of our belongings all over the yard. Kitchen chairs, clothes, personal effects. Even the new crib for the upcoming baby wasn't spared. The police were called and Entitled Aunt was ordered to allow us 72 hours to pack up and leave, to which she tried to play the victim card.
They are squatters. I never gave them permission to stay here. They took advantage of me being out of town to live here and ruin my house.
Keep in mind, the house was still undergoing renovations. It had bare floors in one of the unused bedrooms, and they were getting replaced with hardwood. Removed wall sections for replacing due to mold, and one of the bathrooms were out of service due to repiping. The house still needed a lot of work, as there was no central air and heating, and the water boiler was dated to get replaced soon. We ended up moving to another house while a legal battle between Entitled Aunt and her husband were in the works, but she ended up living in the house in the long run. We would hear from Entitled Aunt every now and then when she somehow got hold of our number through a family member, always calling, asking my dad for money. He never shared what was said, but he gave hints along the lines of,
I let you stay in this house for so long. When you left, you took everything.
Or,
This is all your fault. My house is ruined.
Or my personal favorite,
After everything I've done for you growing up, you do this to your own sister.
My dad feels bad, but still gives her a, forget you, stop calling. Entitled Aunt's husband knew she was staying in the house and decided to just not deal with it, paid my dad his money back from the taxes as the agreement was off, and just let the house go, not caring about the renovations. If Entitled Aunt wanted the house, she could have it, but just because you have something doesn't mean it's okay not taking care of it. We lost contact with Entitled Aunt once again, and we can only hope it's for good. All her kids also disconnected from her due to the abuse bit. They are all living happy and healthy lives. Many years passed, and recently we got word through the grapevine of the following. The property taxes were never paid. The house was condemned. Entitled Aunt got a warrant and was arrested on drug-related charges. A notice was put to vacate. Entitled Aunt still lived there. Entitled Aunt gets arrested again on auto theft. Entitled Aunt gets booted out of house. House gets foreclosed. A lovely couple now lives in the house. Too long didn't read. Entitled Aunt kicks everyone out of house that was paying the property taxes. Entitled Aunt doesn't pay and loses her house. Next up we've got Entitled Cousin walks in on an inappropriate game. Entitled Aunt attempts to sue for emotional trauma. Okay, I kind of lied in the title, but Entitled Aunt does think about suing me. For our cast, we've got me, Entitled Aunt, Entitled Cousin, Friend, Granddad, and Uncle. We were having a family reunion because Grandpa set it up, and he's one of those really old radical hippie dudes, mid-80s. Not the server type, obviously, but the existential one. Little did I know, he got it from a lot of fun that he had back in the 60s to the 90s, and I'm honestly concerned how he's still alive. Okay, back on track. Every time we had a reunion, the location would change from one of the family's houses to the next. This time, it was ours. So we're having a good party. I'm upstairs chatting with my friend on Xbox Live. Everybody could hear our conversation, but they were confused when they came in my room. Without knocking, very rude. They see only me. About 3 times that night, I heard an acknowledging, "Oh," like they had just found the cure to cancer. It was irritating. Friend and me weren't playing the same game, but we were just having a casual chat, since Friend's parents are strict on curfew and won't let him out past 9. Then, Entitled Aunt and her kid show up, with about 5% left on his Nintendo Switch, playing Smash Ultimate. If anyone asks, he was a Bayonetta main, and I was a King K. Rool main. Enter this conversation.
Mommy, my game ran out,
he cried with crocodile tears.
Okay, honey, I'll get you something to play with.
Oh, wait, there's OP. Hi, OP. Do you still have your Xbox?
This seems innocent at first, but let me give you some backstory. Entitled Cousin is a toxic gamer. I mean, the radiation from the toxicity is instantly deadly as soon as he dies once on Fortnite. He's 11. What did you expect? He has broken not 1, not 2, but 5 of my controllers. That's like $400 at least, dude. No, I sold it to get this toaster. Look, it has LED lights. Whoa, cyborg toaster. Obvious lie.
What? Why? I swear, OP, you are the dumbest person I have ever met.
But toaster.
Nobody cares about the toaster,
He screamed at the top of his lungs. Whoa, dude, breathe. In, out. In, out.
I don't care about your meditating bull. Why would you sell your Xbox?
Because. Toaster. The toaster was $15 at most. Entitled Cousin storms off to his mom crying. I thought he was going to suffocate. He was wasting so much oxygen on crying. I go back to my room to avoid the 11-year-old baby and play some Watch Dogs for the nostalgia. You know the part where something inappropriate happens? Yeah, I was on that bit. Entitled Cousin walks in and sees something he's way too young to see. Entitled Cousin is now traumatized and runs out to his entitled mom again. Enter Entitled Aunt Part 2.
What did you show my son?
It was an accident, I swear, and I never gave him permission to come in my room.
He's not a vampire. He can go wherever he wants.
Okay, I'm fine with that. Just stay out of my room from now on.
My little angel can do whatever he wants. Entitled Cousin told me everything. I'm taking all your electronics and I'm suing you for emotional trauma.
First of all, you can't take my stuff. That's stealing. Second, get out of my room. Third, even if you tried to sue me, I could just say that you tried to steal my belongings, which is true. And fourth, I never gave him permission to come in my room, and he should know basic manners by now. All of this is your fault, and you are setting a bad example for your child. This lady has the audacity to throw a comeback with,
However, I am the adult and you are a dumb 14-year-old.
My mom said we are taking all of your stuff and that's fine. OP, see what happens when you open your mouth?
This is because you are a dumb 14-year-old and you have the nerve to talk back to me. I am an adult and I can punish you however I want.
The wild grandpa stalks his prey, presumably Entitled Aunt and Entitled Cousin. The wild grandpa strikes with a comeback and overheard the last parts of the conversation.
Get out of my daughter's house now. I don't know why my son married you. To think I have a thief for a daughter-in-law.
My friend was like, I heard that entire conversation too. He has a really bad microphone, so that's why he hadn't said anything and had only fixed it now. It is convenience. I was shocked as well. I thought he was away from keyboard or something, but little did I know, my friend went into absolute sicko mode on Entitled Aunt. My friend said, OP's aunt, stop touching OP's stuff or I will call the cops. We will agree to sue you for attempted theft and verbal abuse. You are in the wrong. You better wake up. Keep in mind, there are more people defending OP than you, so there's little chance the trial will be in your favor. You will be in community service, and I know the type of person I'm dealing with. You are the type of person who thinks everything can be handed to them on a silver platter. But guess what? If you don't leave OP alone now, you will be lucky to find a plastic bag to use. Entitled Aunt was very religious and thought Satan was speaking to her. She isn't the most tech-savvy person in the world and confuses a Nintendo Switch for a Game Boy. Yeah, she knows nothing about tech.
Spawn of Satan! Leave me alone or I will pull out the crucifix on you. You dare hurt a person of God. I will exorcise you with my own bare hands.
My friend was like, "'Kay."
I am in the right because I follow the word of God. Anybody who doesn't agree with me has crawled out of the depths of hell.
Grandpa was getting very upset and called out to my uncle to get Entitled Aunt out of my room. I forgot about Entitled Cousin and saw him running down the stairs with my Xbox One, 2 terabyte and around 80 digital games, and running as fast as he can to Entitled Aunt and my uncle's car. Thankfully, Grandpa and my uncle got Entitled Aunt out of my room by locking her shoulders. I'm not kidding. And literally lifting her up into the air so she can't move. It was weird. Uncle saw Entitled Cousin with my Xbox. My Xbox is the original black, and Entitled Cousin already had an Xbox One S, which are white. I don't know why he stole my Xbox. Maybe it was for the games. My uncle. Where did you get that Xbox?
It was mine. OP stole it when he came to our house the other week.
Don't pull that crap with me. I know your Xbox is white.
He repainted it to make it look like it isn't white.
Stop! That's my Xbox. See? Give it back now, Entitled Cousin. Entitled Cousin is bawling his eyes out as he gives me my Xbox. Entitled Aunt gets back in the car after Grandpa, my friend, and Uncle threatened to call the cops. Entitled Aunt and Uncle at this point in time are going through a divorce, and for some reason, Entitled Aunt got custody because of laws favoring women in custody of children. Grandpa now helps my uncle pay child support. Excuse me? My uncle makes a great dad, and I think he should have custody. And for our final story of the day, Entitled Aunt tries to gate crash and then destroy my wedding. Before we begin, I think I'm entitled to your thumbs up. Hit the thumbs up and we'll begin. Hello, everybody. This is my first foray into this realm. I'll try and get as much detail as possible, but this happened about a year ago, before me and my wife had gotten married. Beware, this is kind of a long one. Too long didn't read at the bottom. And now the story. So me and my fiancé got engaged early on in our relationship. I think we were both 19 at the time. By the time we were getting close to the wedding, we were getting all the details ironed out. We wanted to handle most things by ourselves to save on money. But for things like a venue, we obviously had to shell out a little money. The cake was being handled by Entitled Aunt. The photography by Entitled Aunt's nice son. He did photography as a hobby and had generously agreed to help us out for free as a wedding present. The problem only began later on down the line when it came to the guest list. Due to our budget, we really only had room for very close friends and family at the wedding, meaning if we didn't know someone particularly well on the other side of each other's family, they simply didn't get an invite. It was our wedding and we were going to do it the way we wanted. Eventually, we had all the invites done and the seating plan arranged. We were now in the final month leading up to the wedding and everything was going according to plan. Until father-in-law gets a text from Entitled Aunt asking if she can bring her less than a year-old granddaughter to the wedding and reception. Bear in mind at this point, all the seats are taken. And although she is an infant, there is a chance the venue may charge us more for an extra head. The church is a public event though, so we craft a reply together which basically says, unfortunately, we can't fit any more room in the reception, but you're more than welcome to bring her to the church service. This didn't sit well with Entitled Aunt. We get a text back saying something along the lines of,
Well, she's very small. She can just sit on my lap. It's no problem at all.
completely missing the point that it doesn't really matter what she thought. If the venue caught on, they'd want to charge us more. Being 20 at the time, each of us couldn't really afford that to happen. All of our income was going into this wedding. This back and forth carried on, and eventually my fiance decides to visit Entitled Nan to try to get some sense out of the situation. Entitled Nan hadn't been an issue until now. When fiance turns up at Entitled Nan's house, she happens to see through into her house. Big window facing the road. It's easy enough for anyone to do, to be honest. And she's horrified to see none other than Entitled Aunt already there. Turns out she'd been spewing out that we were being unreasonable for not allowing her infant granddaughter to the reception, even though she's doing our cake for us and we owe her. Please bear in mind, this child's own mother isn't even invited because we didn't know her well enough. This child would not be able to remember anything of the day. We think she just wanted to bring her as a trophy for Grandmother of the Year award. My fiance couldn't very well walk away after seeing Entitled Aunt, as they unfortunately made eye contact as she approached the house. Fiance walks in and says, paraphrasing, I wasn't there, to Entitled Nan, I just wanted to have a chat with you in private, please. Entitled Aunt severely disapproves of this and demands that she remains in the room. Turns out, Entitled Aunt had also been spewing lies about fiance's parents, saying that they've been bullying her and being out of order because they won't let her take her granddaughter. And fiance, loyal to a fault, stands up for them and says to Entitled Aunt, don't you dare talk about my parents that way. They've done nothing wrong. This continues for a while until it ramps up a bit. Entitled Aunt, not liking the way this is going, aka losing the argument, squares up to fiance and tells her to leave. Little known fact, fiance is a quiet mouse in most situations, but when it's called for, she summons this very tough side of her that I've only seen a handful of times. She sternly informs Entitled Aunt that she's not going anywhere and that she was going to talk to Entitled Nan about the situation in private. Entitled Aunt got fed up of losing the argument and starts insulting my fiance. Now, fiance isn't a violent person, but she's said on many occasions she wished she had slapped Entitled Aunt right in her face then and there. But she didn't. She kept hold of her anger, and instead the emotion hit her as sadness. She had had enough and was stressed out about the wedding. She ran out of the house in tears, with Entitled Nan chasing after her, trying to comfort her. She hadn't gone full Entitled Nan mode yet. That will come, don't worry. Whilst all this was happening, I was at the office. I get a phone call from my fiancée in tears, saying she had just been confronted at Entitled Nan's house and that everything about the wedding was going to fall apart. Being in that situation kind of springs you into action. Luckily, fiancé had also called father-in-law and mother-in-law who went to her aid. I was unable to leave the office, frustratingly. Needless to say, I was absolutely fuming, but we decided to try and be the better people in the situation. That didn't last for long. The next morning, myself and fiancé woke up to many, many messages on Facebook from Entitled Son, Entitled Aunt's son, father of the fabled granddaughter of the Entitled Aunt, calling myself out for discriminating against his daughter, blaming us for tearing the family apart and threatening us, among other things. It was at this point that we had had enough. That part of her side of the family had been nothing but trouble, and with that we revoked the invitation for Entitled Aunt and Entitled Son. Unfortunately, all of this severed the ties with Entitled Aunt's nice son, who was going to do our photography. I can't blame him for having to pull out when his mother was being so stupid. This left us in a rather tricky situation, but lucky for us, my sister is an avid baker in her spare time, and upon my mother hearing about this mentioned to her, she then offered to make us a much larger cake, entirely as we'd like it, all for free. It was an absolute godsend, and I feel obligated to say that everyone loved the cake. They even said that it was some of the best cake they had ever had. We had had 3 layers, Victoria sponge, chocolate, and red velvet. Photography was also miraculously taken care of. Fiance's work caught wind of the problem after my fiance mentioned it to a colleague, and between them pooled money to pay for a professional photographer for the day. The photos were incredible, and I feel so privileged that they thought of us like that. I've never been on the end of an act of generosity like that before. It really does make you feel all warm and fuzzy inside. Anyway, you thought that this story was over? Unfortunately, it's not. Fast forward to the night before the wedding. I'm sleeping at fiance's other grandparents' house. Lovely couple, very supportive, for the night as per wedding ritual. Me and fiance had already made our goodbyes, both excited for the following day to finally arrive, and just about had forgotten about all the problems that had happened. But unfortunately, it was not to last. At about 11 p.m., I get a phone call from my fiance in tears. Turns out, entitled aunt had been spreading poisonous lies to her side of the family, saying that we were being verbally abusive to her and entitled son, and had kicked them out of the wedding for no reason. This was enough to turn some of the more spineless of her side of the family to back off of the wedding at the last minute, literally the night before. Bear in mind, we had printed out a full table plan that was now ruined. It was handmade and everything. We now had an extra 5 seats that needed filling. They had been prepaid, so we were going to lose money if we couldn't get them filled. Mother-in-law had a stroke of genius. Turns out, mother-in-law's parents, the nice grandparents, had friends who had gifted me and fiance early wedding presents even though they didn't need to. They were just happy that the grandchildren of their friends were having a wedding. Mother-in-law and her mother organized inviting them to the wedding, and luckily they were free on very short notice. So on the day itself, we didn't have any free seats, and all the seats that we did have were used by people who actually wanted to be there. It was a horrendous turn of events, but one we are rather grateful for now that we are looking back. A year has passed since this incident. Wedding was in February of 2018, and we cut off communication from our family and entitled aunt and entitled nan, who proceeded to back up entitled aunt and say she is innocent, to the fury of fiance as she had witnessed the situation at her home unfold. Entitled aunt to this day refuses to apologize as she believes she's done nothing wrong. But you can't just go around inviting extra people to someone else's wedding. It doesn't work like that. I'm pleased that our lives are now carrying on without the toxic energy that we were getting from them. I'm glad we experienced this when we did, so we could block them out and move on with our lives. Further to this, we've recently just celebrated our first anniversary together, and we plan on buying our first home in the coming months. That's all for now, but don't be blue. I'll be back soon with more stories for you. Remember to listen to Mr. Reddit every night, so your dreams will be wonderful like you are and bright.